Hello and welcome. Today we delve into an astonishing chapter of history, the moment when German prisoners of war first set foot at Norfolk Naval Base in 1943, and the shockingly normal scene that greeted them. Imagine a port where, instead of chaos or fear, prisoners saw Americans working side by side, women in coveralls operating cranes, children selling newspapers, completely unbothered by the presence of enemy soldiers. But what if I told you that the Americans not only treated prisoners with remarkable civility, but also offered kosher meals prepared by Jewish personnel, despite Nazi racial doctrines? Could it be that this country's wartime reality defied everything the Nazis believed about America? How could a nation at war display such kindness, even to those it considered enemies? And what about the medical care that Germans received, penicillin and humane treatment, while in Nazi Germany, such compassion was almost unthinkable? What if the most unsettling truth was that this civility and normalcy were more dangerous to Nazi ideology than any battlefield defeat? How could the Americans, in their handling of prisoners and their everyday routines, undermine the very values the Nazi regime used to justify its racial policies? The answer lies in a profound, almost surreal contrast, one that challenges the very notions of war and humanity. In this video, we will uncover how a society at war refused to behave as a typical wartime enemy, how prisoners encountered an unexpected level of dignity, and how these moments quietly reshaped the war's moral landscape. The most extraordinary stories are about to unfold, so stay with us as we begin to peel back the layers of this astonishing American paradox, starting right now. On the morning of June 4th, in the year 1943, the sprawling Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia buzzed with activity unlike anything the newly arrived prisoners of war had ever encountered. Unofficially, Herman Butcher, a German officer, clung to the ship's railing as he made his way down the gangplank, his legs trembling slightly from the fatigue and disorientation of a 14-day Atlantic crossing. As his eyes adjusted to the subdued light penetrating the morning haze, he was struck by a scene that starkly contrasted 3 years' worth of Nazi propaganda's portrayal of the United States. In this moment, he observed American dock workers, both white and black, working side by side, their hands skillfully maneuvering machinery that seemed to belong to an era far beyond the present. Women dressed in coveralls operated towering cranes with ease, a sight that symbolized both progress and harmony. Children could be seen at the gates, enthusiastically selling newspapers to passers-by, seemingly oblivious to the presence of enemy soldiers. What was most startling to Herman was the lack of fear or flight at the sight of enemy uniforms. There was no panic, no chaos, only a calm, almost casual normality that seemed to defy the image he had been taught to believe. He whispered to the man behind him, a flicker of disbelief evident in his voice, "Die Spin and de Americano Americana," which roughly translated as the spin in the American spirit. The thought that crossed his mind, unspoken but deeply felt, was that the Americans must be completely mad. Herman Butcher would later document this extraordinary encounter in his memoir, published behind barbed wire in Germany in 1952, a detailed account of life in America from the perspective of a prisoner of war. The Norfolk base itself was vast, covering approximately 4,300 acres, with docks extending endlessly beyond the limits of sight, cranes moving load after load of ships in a coordinated ballet of industrial efficiency. In the span of a single morning, the port system handled a tonnage that exceeded the weekly capacity of Hamburg's busiest port, a staggering reflection of American industrial might. Yet it was not the sheer magnitude of operation that left the prisoners stunned, but rather its uncanny normalcy. Civilians wandered freely among military installations, undisturbed by the war or the presence of enemy soldiers. Vendors set up stands, selling coffee and donuts within sight of warships that, to the prisoners, seemed almost regal in their stateliness. Nearby, a brass band played lively tunes at a rally promoting war bonds, the music echoing across the open expanse. On this day, a contingent of around 2,500 veterans from the Roosevelt's Africa campaign stood in formation on American soil, marking the first sizable group of what would ultimately be more than 425,000 German prisoners held in the United States by the war's end. What they would witness in the ensuing months was a sight far more unsettling to any seasoned military mind than mere abundance. It was a display of a nation at war that refused to behave as a nation at war should. It was a society so confident in its strength and stability that it treated even mortal enemies like uninvited house guests, relaxing the usual warfare protocols and displaying a level of civility that was almost disarming. The strange customs, unanticipated kindnesses, and bizarre behaviors of the American people would, over time, prove more detrimental to Nazi ideology than any battlefield defeat or strategic failure. The process of intake at Norfolk commenced with what Butcher would later describe in his memoir as an initial impossibility. From Poland to France and into Africa, the military doctrine of the Wehrmacht had held that prisoners were either valuable assets to be exploited or inconvenient burdens to be minimized. The Geneva Convention was acknowledged only when it suited the purpose, sometimes grudgingly, sometimes outright ignored. But here in Norfolk, American officers appeared to interpret these rules in a new way entirely. By reading them aloud in fluent German, explaining prisoners' rights, and inquiring about their dietary needs. Records from the International Red Cross indicate that, in June of the year 1943, Jewish American personnel, including several sergeants bearing clearly Jewish surnames, took active part in distributing Red Cross packages. They carefully explained that kosher meals were available for Jewish prisoners, an act of respect and understanding that would have been unheard of in the German military's treatment of enemies. Several Wehrmacht soldiers, caught in a nervous ripple of laughter, believed at first that such kindness was mockery, but it was not. The American military had meticulously prepared to accommodate the religious dietary requirements of their enemies, demonstrating a level of humanitarian concern that was utterly unexpected and fundamentally at odds with Nazi racial ideology. Medical inspections, far from being mere routine procedures, defied military logic. German prisoners, wounded during their capture or prior battles, received treatment with penicillin, the miracle drug that was only just beginning to become available to American troops. And this despite the shortages and rationing typical on the in his detailed report from July of 1943. Matroy observed a striking fact. The medical care administered to German prisoners of war was at least on par with, if not superior to, the treatment afforded to American military personnel. This revelation caused quite a stir among the prisoners, who often expressed their disbelief and amazement at the level of care they received. It was a stark contrast to the harsh and often unreliable medical conditions they expected. Interestingly, within the American military framework, African-American medical personnel played a notable role by serving in integrated medical units at Norfolk, Virginia, though such integration was not universal across the entire armed forces. One particularly well-documented incident involved a black medical technician who drew blood from German Wehrmacht officers for routine health screenings, a task that in Nazi Germany would have been criminalized, as racial contact was explicitly forbidden by law. Here, however, contact based on race was simply a routine aspect of military medical procedures, reflecting a profound discrepancy between the legal racial segregation in Germany and the practical realities of wartime service in the United States. Perhaps the most startling scene of this racial and cultural juxtaposition occurred during a seemingly mundane moment: the prisoners' first meal after arrival. They were escorted into a mess hall where American sailors who had been captured or otherwise detained were already eating. These two groups, enemies who had been engaged in deadly convoy battles mere days earlier, now found themselves sharing the same dining facility. The prisoners and their captors ate at opposite ends of the hall, yet they used the same food lines and consumed meals of comparable quality and quantity. The Americans appeared to be barely aware or concerned of their enemy's proximity, more engrossed by a radio broadcast relating to a baseball game than by observing the Germans mere 50 feet away. This juxtaposition underscored an almost surreal normalization of contact, where racial and national enmity were temporarily set aside in the crucible of wartime necessity. The subsequent 3-day train journey to internal camps represented yet another level of this complex cognitive dissonance. Unlike the secretive and tightly controlled prisoner transportation in Nazi Germany, American authorities exhibited neither concern nor effort in concealing the presence of prisoners of war. The trains themselves were not crude boxcars, but well-maintained passenger coaches, complete with cushioned seats. These trains regularly pulled into stations where civilians assembled visibly, observing the proceedings with curiosity and open interest. Hundreds of people, documented in the official logs from Union Station in Washington, D.C. in June of 1943, watched German prisoners as they observed American families bidding farewell to loved ones heading to military training camps. Women kissed their husbands goodbye in casual, public displays of affection. Children joyfully waved small flags while teenagers sat in the station restaurant, sharing milkshakes. It was a scene of ordinary life, splashed with elements of national pride and normalcy, blurring the line between enemy combatants and civilians. The same station platform hosted both prisoners and their countrymen, separated chiefly by glass windows and the watchful eyes of guards. Guards who appeared to be more concerned with directing the flow of passengers than with safeguarding prisoners from possible escape. The trains traversed a landscape filled with industrial complex after industrial complex, factories that openly displayed their names without any attempt at camouflage. For instance, the Glenn L. Martin Aircraft Manufacturing Plant in Baltimore boasted parking lots filled with personal cars belonging to workers, visible from the train windows. Prisoners could plainly see rows of B-26 Marauder bombers lined up and ready for delivery, their presence an open testament to American industrial prowess. There was no security paranoia, no effort to conceal the scale or success of the nation's war effort. Instead, America's industrial infrastructure operated openly, proudly, in full view of its enemies. As the train moved through Pennsylvania, it passed by coal mines and steel mills working in continuous shifts, industries that powered the wartime economy. The night sky over these regions was illuminated by the orange glow of blast furnaces that burned relentlessly, day and night, pumping out steel and other essential materials. Surrounding each industrial complex, among the vast factory yards, were areas of workers' housing, dispersed neighborhoods filled with individual houses, complete with small gardens, rather than the barracks common in military camps. These quaint residential communities were alive with electric lights burning in every window and radio antennas sprouting from rooftops, symbolizing a nation where industry and daily life intertwined seamlessly, even amidst a time of global conflict. At a stop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, all these details were recorded in the official logs of the Pennsylvania Railroad. German officers observed the American workers at the shift change, witnessing firsthand an everyday scene. Men carrying lunchboxes, dressed in leather shoes and wearing wristwatches, driving their personal vehicles from homes to work. According to the memoir of Butcher, one of the prisoners, one worker threw away a half-eaten apple in a casual act of wastefulness and then opened a fresh apple from his lunchbox, an act that underscored the abundance and normal. During the turbulent years of World War II, a remarkable story unfolded of a labor camp that defied conventional expectations and set a new standard in the treatment of enemy prisoners of war. This tale revolves around a laborer whose resilience and determination left a lasting impression on the military personnel. Officers who had witnessed firsthand the desperate struggles of their fellow nationals, fighting over meager scraps of food and resources in the hardships of Africa. The camp in question, known as Camp Hearn, was established in December of the year 1942. It was situated on a sprawling expanse of approximately 720 acres, nestled near the small town of Hearn within Robertson County, Texas. Official military records reveal that this installation was capable of housing up to 4,800 German prisoners at a time, all kept under conditions that markedly surpassed what most of these prisoners had ever experienced during their civilian lives. The entire setup, its construction, layout, and day-to-day operation are meticulously preserved within the administrative documents of the Army Corps of Engineers, along with extensive records held by the War Department and archived at the National Archives in the United States. The infrastructure and facilities of the camp stood out as a profound challenge to the German prisoners' previous notions of incarceration, social status, and humane treatment. The accommodations consisted of sturdy wooden barracks equipped with electric lighting, an amenity that distant oil lamp-illuminated German prisons did not possess. Inside these structures, prisoners found the luxury of indoor plumbing, with flushing toilets and hot water heaters, a significant upgrade from the primitive conditions many had endured back in Germany. Each prisoner was provided with a personal bed, complete with a mattress, fresh sheets and blankets, far from the straw pallets that were common elsewhere. Beyond mere shelter, the camp offered amenities designed to foster a humane environment and mental well-being. Recreation halls were outfitted with ping-pong tables, musical instruments, and libraries, encouraging leisure activities and intellectual pursuits. These facilities led Swiss Inspector Emil Sandstum, who visited in August of 1943, to record in his official report that the conditions at Camp Herne exceeded not only the provisions of the Geneva Convention, but also surpassed the living standards of many German civilians. Such observations underscore the camp's commitment to humane treatment and the effort to uphold a standard that was, at the very least, superior to what the prisoners could have known in their homeland. The commanding officer of the camp, Lieutenant Colonel Cecile Stiles, whose military service record remains preserved in official archives, addressed the incoming prisoners in their native language, German. Prior to the war, he had studied German at the university level, equipping himself to communicate directly and effectively. His initial explanations of the camp's rules and regulations soon gave way to an approach that embodied unprecedented leniency. Prisoners were permitted, in large part, to govern themselves. Prisoners had the right to elect spokesmen among their ranks, organize various activities, and manage their daily schedules within the framework of military requirements. This concept of self-governance, allowing enemies of the state to exercise authority over their microcosm, seemed initially either an emblem of military weakness or a calculated trap. However, the camp's design aimed to foster discipline and morale through autonomy rather than mere outward control. Within this environment, the camp hospital, which came under monthly inspection by the International Red Cross, was equipped with advanced medical devices that many civilian hospitals in Germany lacked at the time. These facilities included X-ray machines for diagnostic purposes, surgical suites for emergency procedures, dental chairs, and an array of pharmaceutical supplies, among which was penicillin, the revolutionary new antibiotic. When prisoner Georg Gartner, who later earned the distinction of being the last prisoner to surrender in 1985, developed appendicitis in September of 1943, he was swiftly operated on within hours of diagnosis. The operation was performed by Captain William Calhoun, a seasoned Army surgeon from Dallas, with the assistance of German medical staff, both prisoners and staff, highlighting the camp's integration of professional expertise across national lines. Yet it was not merely medical care that distinguished Camp Herne from standard wartime detention centers. The camp's canteen, an on-site store, became legendary among the prisoners. Here, inmates could purchase a variety of goods using script, a form of currency earned through voluntary labor within the camp. Supplies available range from cigarettes, chocolate, soap, and writing materials to musical instruments and art supplies, small luxuries that had previously been unimaginable in the context of wartime captivity. The War Department officially authorized these sales, documented meticulously within the records of the Quartermaster Corps. The rationale behind this policy was rooted in the belief that these small comforts would serve to bolster prisoner morale and, as a consequence, decrease the likelihood of escape attempts. The concept that enemy prisoners could shop for their own needs, select their purchases, and enjoy a semblance of normalcy was a departure from traditional prisoner of war management, an innovative twist in military thinking that recognized the importance near the town of Kingsville, Texas. A remarkable scene unfolded that seemed almost incomprehensible from a European perspective. German prisoners of war, who had been captured during the global conflict, found themselves immersed in the vast and thriving landscape of American agriculture on a scale that was truly staggering. The ranch where they were employed stretched across an astonishing 825,000 acres of land, a territory so expansive that it exceeded the area of the entire state of Rhode Island, highlighting the enormity of U.S. farming operations during this period. Records from the years 1643 to 1645 reveal that these German prisoners worked side by side with Mexican-American workers known as vaqueros, who were skilled cattlemen, as well as with some African-American ranch hands. Together, they served in the intricate and demanding tasks involved in cattle ranching and agricultural productivity. Despite the limited social interactions between different racial groups, the working environment directly challenged the very racial hierarchy theories propagated by Nazi ideology, which sought to emphasize racial purity and separation. The prisoners themselves documented their own astonishment in letters that managed to pass through military censorship. In these, they expressed amazement at the rapid mechanization of American farming techniques. For instance, a single combine harvester, an advanced machine that could thresh and clean grain in one pass, replaced dozens of manual laborers, an astonishing leap in productivity that would have been unthinkable in Nazi Germany. Furthermore, the manner of transporting harvested crops had been revolutionized. Trucks, rather than traditional horse-drawn wagons, moved the bounty from fields to storage or processing facilities, illustrating how modern and efficient American agriculture had become. The ranch even utilized small civilian aircraft, airplanes that were not military but used for surveying purposes, to keep track of cattle herds and identify strays across vast, open ranges. The ranch foreman, Richard Clayburgh Jr., regarded the German prisoners as temporary workers rather than enemies, as indicated by official employment records documenting their role in maintaining the ranch's operations. Evidence from cotton gins across Texas, specifically in places like Taylor, Caldwell, and Waller counties, further illustrates the remarkable abilities of the prisoners. They observed and participated in processing cotton at speeds that would have been inconceivable in European factories. At the Herman Cotton Oil Mill, which employed German prisoners from August of 1643 to December of 1645, more cotton was processed in a single day than entire German textile mills managed in an entire month. Despite the intense pace of work, prisoners reported that they were allowed regular breaks, enjoyed full meals, and listened to radios, an activity that provided them with entertainment during work hours. Such treatment, rooted in respect and kindness, resulted in surprisingly high productivity levels, a stark contradiction to the harsh discipline typical of their experiences in wartime Europe and Nazi-controlled work environments. The prisoners also observed that American farmers openly discussed politics, highlighting a level of freedom and transparency that would have been unimaginable in Nazi Germany, where dissent was harshly suppressed. Declassified FBI reports from the 1970s reveal that German prisoners of war were profoundly shocked by the openness with which American farmers voiced criticism of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the federal government's policies. One documented incident involved a farmer near Bryan, Texas, who dismissively told a Department of Agriculture inspector to go to hell during a dispute over crop allocation. Not only did this farmer speak out boldly, but he faced no repercussions, an act of defiance that in Nazi Germany would have likely resulted in severe punishment, even death. Throughout Texas, local newspapers, such as the Hearn Democrat, the Bryan Daily Eagle, and the Temple Daily Telegram, published stories describing the interactions between the German prisoners and American civilians. These articles serve as valuable historical records, confirming the social encounters that left both the prisoners and their American hosts visibly stunned. Notably, in December of 1643, the Hearn Democrat reported on the prisoners participating in supervised Christmas shopping outings, where they witnessed vividly the burgeoning American teenage culture. Young Americans gathered at drugstore soda fountains, unaccompanied by adults, where boys and girls mingled freely, dancing to the lively sounds of jukeboxes playing jazz and swing, musical styles that Nazi ideology had labeled as degenerate Negro music. Despite wartime austerity, these teenagers dressed fashionably, showing no signs of military or wartime influence on their youth culture. This display of normalcy and vibrancy deeply impressed the prisoners. American women's behavior also left a strong impression on the prisoners, especially given the roles they played during the war. Women drove trucks for the Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, operated businesses along Main Street, and even supervised male workers at defense plants. At nearby Bryan Army Airfield, part of the Women Air Force Service Pilots WASP program, women pilots flew military aircraft with skill and confidence, breaking traditional gender barriers and demonstrating how American women contributed directly to the war effort in aviation and other technical fields. Official military. During the turbulent years of 1943 and 1944, the presence of German prisoners of war in the small Texas community of Hearne became a notable aspect of local life, with their daily activities and integration into the community serving as a testament to the complex dynamics of wartime captivity. The camp, known as Camp Hearne, was under close observation by military authorities, who meticulously documented the prisoners' movements, labor routines, and interactions within the surrounding area, aiming to strike a delicate balance between security and humane treatment. In a remarkable display of community engagement and a departure from the typical wartime secrecy, churches across Robertson County actively opened their doors to these German prisoners, inviting them to attend religious services. Records from several prominent local churches, including the First Baptist Church of Hearne, the First Methodist Church, and St. Mary's Catholic Church, all confirmed that prisoners were welcomed into their congregations and participated in worship alongside local residents. These accommodations fostered an unusual sense of camaraderie and mutual respect during these difficult times, highlighting the community's efforts to maintain humanitarian principles amidst war. On the evening of Christmas Eve in 1943, the local newspaper, the Hearne Democrat, reported with an air of quiet pride that German prisoners had attended festive services across multiple churches, sitting quietly among congregants whose own sons were serving overseas. The report emphasized the peaceful conduct of the prisoners, noting that no incidents or disturbances occurred during these gatherings, which served as a poignant reminder of the humanity that persisted despite the broader conflict. By the early months of the following year, the American military's efforts to transform and educate the prisoners advanced significantly through the specialized programs operated by the Prost Marshal General's Office. These initiatives, conducted at Camp Hearne, were highly sophisticated, employing a range of educational methods aimed at ideological re-education and reintegration. Although prisoners experienced these programs as voluntary learning opportunities, declassified documents from Record Group 389 reveal the underlying strategic intent behind them. The camp's library, originally stocked with 500 books donated by caring citizens of Hearne, expanded rapidly, reaching over 5,000 volumes by August of 1944, indicating a substantial investment in literacy and educational outreach. The collection of reading materials was diverse and carefully curated. Books supplied through the American Library Association's Books for Prisoners program included works by renowned German authors who had been banned or censored by the Nazi regime. Among these were Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, an introspective novel examining European culture and mental health, and writings by Erich Maria Remarque, including All Quiet on the Western Front, which depicted the brutal realities of trench warfare, as well as literary works by Jewish authors such as Leon Feuerwenger, which would have been considered dangerous or subversive in Nazi Germany. The availability of such literature allowed prisoners to read books, some of which might have meant certain death if owned in Nazi Germany, fostering intellectual growth and ideological reflection. Further expanding the educational scope, professor from Sam Houston State Teachers College, now known as Sam Houston State University, contributed by offering correspondence courses. College records indicate that between 1944 and 1945, approximately 340 German prisoners participated in these classes, studying subjects like English language, American history, mathematics, and agricultural science. These courses helped prisoners acquire vital skills and knowledge that could potentially aid in their reintegration into society after the war's conclusion. Milestone visits took place regularly, with college professors traveling to Camp Hearne each month to deliver lectures, oversee examinations, and assess student progress. Alongside the educational initiatives, efforts to understand and influence prisoner attitudes extended into media and communication. The camp published its own newspaper called Der Spiel, which was a significant tool in shaping prisoners' perceptions and fostering a sense of community. It is worth noting that while the German prisoners at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island, produced a publication called Der Ruf, the Hearne prisoners' newspaper, Der Spiel, The Mirror, had distinct content and purpose. not to be confused with the Nazi propaganda-oriented Deruf. Archives preserved at the Army Heritage and Education Center reveal an intriguing evolution of publication content from early editions in 1943, which primarily featured Nazi propaganda, to later issues in 1944 that increasingly discussed democratic ideals and questions about the occupied homeland. These shifts reflected the broader psychological strategy implemented within the camp, as part of a divisive yet carefully orchestrated campaign. Declassified documents from the Secret Operations Division expose an intricate system of psychological manipulation, which aimed to selectively influence the prisoners' ideological stances. The program identified three broad categories of prisoners based on their political beliefs and attitudes. Approximately 10% were anti-Nazi resistors, roughly 75% showed no strong political allegiance and could be considered non-political prisoners, and about 15% remained fervent Nazis. Each group received tailored treatment designed to maximize the potential for ideological shift, with those identified as anti-Nazi receiving special privileges and opportunities for education, effectively turning them into informal leaders within the camp. These specially selected anti-Nazi prisoners, identified through a detailed effort to document ideological shifts within the prisoner of war camp population, weekly reports meticulously recorded the evolving attitudes and beliefs of those held in captivity. Among the crucial figures involved in analyzing and reporting these changes was Major Maxwell McKnight, serving as the assistant executive officer. His comprehensive notes and observations, which have been preserved within the archives of the Hoover Institution, reveal significant insights into how exposure to American society and targeted educational programs impacted the prisoners' perspectives over time, especially during the difficult months of late 1944. Remarkably, the data demonstrated that the rate at which prisoners experienced ideological transformation exceeded the most optimistic expectations held by military officials. It was noted that approximately 60% of prisoners who had no prior political inclinations showed tangible signs of shifting toward democratic ideals. This change was especially evident after they had been subjected to nearly half a year of immersion in American societal norms in a carefully curated educational environment aimed at fostering democratic values. The camp's facilities played a crucial role in this process. Prisoners of war, or perhaps more accurately, prisoners of circumstance, found themselves in settings that sharply contrasted with their previous experiences, particularly in terms of material abundance. The exposure to seemingly endless supplies of food, supplies, and resources appeared almost mockingly dismissive of their former realities of scarcity and deprivation, typical of wartime Germany. One of the most revealing examples of this contrast was observed at the Alcoa aluminum plant located in Rockdale, Texas. This facility, where PWs handled raw materials starting in September of 1943, became a site of unexpected enlightenment. Records indicate that workers at the plant discarded more aluminum scrap in a single day than German aircraft factories could acquire over an entire year week, highlighting the vast disparity in industrial output and waste. Moreover, the prisoners assigned to scrap collection duties at the plant, thus directly exposed to American industrial waste, began to comprehend the scale of American industrial might, as well as its wastefulness, which was inconceivable under wartime German resource conditions. Food processing plants, however, provided perhaps the most profound psychological shock. In Cameron, Texas, at the Stokely Brothers Cannery, historically verified through Malam County records, prisoners observed disturbing scenes in which perfectly edible produce was deliberately discarded because it failed minor cosmetic standards. Tomatoes that were only slightly underripe, corn with irregular kernels, beans bearing minor blemishes, all of these foods were destroyed despite the fact that thousands of German civilians back home faced starvation due to shortages. A poignant testament to this discrepancy was preserved in the Red Cross archives in the form of a letter from Corporal Friedrich Müller, a German prisoner. Müller recounted, "Today we destroyed hundreds of pounds of fruit because it did not meet canning standards." The letter expressed an anguished view. Fruit that would be treasured in Germany is garbage here. Meanwhile, the American supervisor overseeing the process expressed apology for the waste, not recognizing that such apologies only underscored the Americans' overwhelming abundance. a concept that was almost unfathomable to the prisoners. All of these scenes occurred against the backdrop of what appears to be an intentionally orchestrated holiday celebration at Camp Hearn during Christmas of 1943. The event was extensively documented across local newspapers, Red Cross reports, and military records. Despite the wartime context, the entire small town of Hearn, with a population of roughly 2,000 residents, mobilized in a remarkable show of community spirit to ensure that the enemy prisoners received a celebration befitting the holiday spirit. This extraordinary response defied every wartime expectation of hostility or indifference toward the prisoners. The local paper, the Hearn Democrat, published a comprehensive list of donations on December 23rd, indicating that the community had pooled together a substantial amount of resources. Local churches collected nearly 5,000 individual gift packages filled with toys, clothing, and other holiday items. Schools contributed handmade cards, decorations, and festive displays to decorate the camp. The American Legion Post numbered 1640, composed of veterans of the First World War who had fought against German forces, generously donated cigarettes, candies, and various sporting equipment intended for the prisoners. The Lions Club, another community organization, provided musical instruments to enhance the holiday atmosphere. The local garden club decorated the camp extensively with holly and evergreen boughs, turning both the camp and its surroundings into a veritable winter wonderland. The camp's Christmas centerpiece was a massive, 30-foot-tall tree erected in the main compound. Photographs taken at the time show it illuminated by electric lights that burned continuously throughout the holiday period, creating a dazzling display even amidst the darkness of winter. The records from the camp's quartermaster reveal that more electricity was used to power these holiday lights than most small German villages utilized for all their needs combined, making it clear that such displays of illumination would have been unthinkable in peacetime Germany, where resource scarcity and rationing limited such luxuries. Moreover, the local churches staged Christmas concerts performed in German, interpreted by the camp choir, which had learned the carols phonetically in the prisoners' native tongue. During the tumultuous years of World War II, the complex and often contradictory realities faced by those involved in the conflict extended beyond the battlefield and into the social fabric of the nations engaged. This was especially evident among American soldiers and prisoners of war, whose experiences sometimes challenged the rigid narratives propagated by propaganda and official rhetoric. An illustrative example of this can be seen in the reactions of American mothers, who, despite the grief of sending their sons off to fight the Germans, experienced moments of profound cognitive dissonance. Many would sing patriotic songs while simultaneously feeling a sense of unease about the enemy soldiers detained nearby, revealing a conflicted emotional landscape that cut through simplistic notions of good and evil. This internal contradiction was vividly documented in the detailed records maintained by military guards, which included accounts of Christmas celebrations among the prisoners. The festive menus preserved in quartermaster files paint a picture of a surprisingly rich holiday feast. Each meal was carefully planned to include roast turkey, allocated at £1 per man, as well as succulent ham, sweet potatoes candied to perfection, green beans, and hearty cornbread stuffing. The menu also featured traditional accompaniments such as cranberry sauce, minced pies, apple pie, and even ice cream. To wash down the feast, enlisted personnel were offered beer, while officers enjoyed California wine. The entire holiday meal amounted to approximately 5,000 calories per individual, underscoring a level of care and effort dedicated to maintaining morale, perhaps even questioning the harsh moral dichotomies often associated with wartime. In stark contrast, the daily diet of German civilians, when supplies were available, was much more modest, typically providing only around 1,200 calories per day. Meanwhile, the unique socio-racial dynamics encountered by German prisoners of war working in Texas added further complexity to the wartime narrative. Exposed to American racial hierarchies that seemingly contradicted Nazi racial ideology and the negative stereotypes propagated by propaganda, German prisoners found themselves in situations that defied expectation. They interacted with Black Americans, some of whom were soldiers guarding them, and engaged in labor alongside Mexican-American and African-American workers. Situations that highlighted the contradictions between America's self-image and its social realities. The reports from military authorities and local newspapers reveal a picture more nuanced than the monolithic stories often told. At Camp Hearn, for instance, African-American soldiers from the 359th Infantry Regiment sometimes carried out guard duties. This placed German prisoners in the awkward position of taking orders from Black Americans, a fact that starkly contrasted with Nazi notions of racial superiority. Some prisoners responded by requesting transfers to avoid such authority, though these requests were often denied by camp administration. Official reports, such as one from Lieutenant Colonel Stiles dated December of 1943, acknowledged the objections of German prisoners to being guarded by Black soldiers, but indicated that these concerns were systematically ignored, emphasizing the racial hierarchies upheld even amid the broader context of victory. Yet within the camp, prisoners also observed the contradictions inherent in segregation. For example, prisoners could dine at local establishments that refused service to the Black soldiers who guarded them, and they could attend movie theaters from which their Black guards were barred from sitting in the main sections. These discrepancies highlighted an uncomfortable reality. In certain social contexts, German enemies, despite being adversaries in war, enjoyed greater social freedoms than some American citizens who happened to be Black. Such paradoxes served to unsettle the rigid moral certainties that dominated wartime ideology, revealing a landscape where racial inequality persisted even within the supposedly just and victorious American system. This bewildering paradox was reinforced in agricultural settings documented by the Farm Security Administration, where prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American and African-American laborers. The efficiency and productivity of mixed-race work crews often defied the racist theories of racial superiority so central to Nazi ideology. German prisoners engaged in labor such as cotton picking often outperformed their Black counterparts, serving as stark evidence that race alone did not determine ability or worth. Several compelling cases exemplify how American racial dynamics and labor practices contributed to the ideological erosion of some German prisoners. One notable individual was Herman Butcher, who arrived at Camp Hearn in June of 1943 as a committed Nazi supporter. Over time, his memoir reveals a gradual unraveling of his ideological convictions, prompted by the daily realities he faced and the compassion he witnessed among Americans. A decisive moment occurred during Christmas of 1943 when citizens of Hearn bestowed gifts upon the prisoners. Butcher famously reflected that these acts of kindness, coming from a community that had sent their sons to fight his country, represented strength rather than weakness. He recognized that the kindness was a sign of confidence, a confidence rooted in the belief that victory was already assured, not merely in military terms, but in the eventual peace that would follow victory. The personal journeys of individuals like Butcher extended beyond the war. After immigrating to the United States in the early 1950s, he became a naturalized citizen in 1958. Subsequently, he built a career as an engineer for General Motors, retiring after decades of dedicated service. In the course of his life, he ultimately married an American woman, dedicated himself to raising children in the United States, and worked professionally as a tennis instructor in California. The narrative of his life took a significant turn in 1985 when he finally decided to participate in a television documentary. By that time, he had been a resident of America for so many years that his affiliation with the United States had surpassed his original connection to Germany, making him more American than German in his identity and daily life. His remarkable story, which he recounted in his autobiographical work titled Hitler's Last Soldier in America, serves as a compelling testament to the profound and often unexpected transformative influence of American society on individuals. Reinhold Pell's escape from the confines of Camp Washington in the state of Illinois occurred in the year 1945. Interestingly, his departure was motivated not by brutal treatment or mistreatment, but rather by a sense of dullness and a curious desire to explore the American way of life firsthand. As detailed in his memoir, Your Enemies Are Human, Pell managed to live in Chicago without official authorization for an entire 7 years. During this period, he made a living by working in various bookstores, gradually immersing himself in the local community and culture. He eventually married an American woman, a step that further rooted him in his new environment. In the year 1953, he made the decision to voluntarily surrender to authorities, formalizing his status in the United States. An investigation conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation uncovered that Pell had not broken any laws apart from entering the country illegally. This fact worked in his favor, and in 1959, he successfully obtained American citizenship. Following his naturalization, he built a prosperous life as a businessman and later took on the role of sponsoring other German immigrants, helping them integrate into American society just as he had. The experiences of German prisoners of war across more than 500 internment camps scattered throughout the United States varied considerably depending on location and facility. However, certain patterns of activity and organization were common among these camps. For instance, Camp Alva, situated in Oklahoma, was specialized in agricultural training programs. Records maintained by the Department of Agriculture detail how German prisoners managed a demonstration farm spanning approximately 200 acres, where they applied American farming techniques under the guidance of agricultural experts. Within this setting, prisoners learned a wide array of agricultural skills, including mechanical cultivation methods, crop rotation practices, techniques for soil conservation, and the development and cultivation of hybrid seeds. These skills proved to be exceptionally valuable when many of these prisoners eventually returned to a Germany devastated by war, bringing with them knowledge that contributed to the country's agricultural recovery. The agricultural program at Camp Alva was so successful that local farmers, impressed by the quality and efficiency of the work, began hiring prisoner work crews at wages significantly higher than typical labor rates. This practice created a competitive environment for available prisoner labor, highlighting the camp's impact on local farming communities. In contrast, Camp Concordia in Kansas gained a reputation for its vibrant art program. German prisoners of war at this location produced murals that have endured to the present day within the Stone County Courthouse and other nearby buildings. Moreover, the camp hosted an orchestra, which was equipped with instruments donated by local Kansas communities, and these musicians performed concerts for civilian audiences on a regular basis. The local press, represented notably by the Concordia Blade newspaper, reviewed these concerts with high praise, often emphasizing the professionalism and skill displayed by the enemy musicians. Today, the artwork created by the prisoners, including murals and sculptures, is included in permanent collections housed by several museums across the state of Kansas, serving as lasting testament to their artistic talents. Camp Trinidad, located in Colorado, faced particularly harsh winter conditions, with temperatures often plummeting to as low as -20 degrees Fahrenheit. The quartermaster records reflect that the U.S. Army provided German prisoners of war at this camp with specialized Arctic-grade clothing, insulated barracks, and an increased caloric intake, up to 4,000 calories per day during the winter months, to ensure their health and safety. An inspection by Swiss observer André Poncho in February of 1944 noted that the Germans at Trinidad received better winter provisions than German Wehren troops fighting on the Eastern Front, based on prisoner reports. Perhaps most astonishing to German military officials was the level of transparency in American information dissemination. Prisoners had unhindered access to American newspapers that openly criticized the war effort, highlighted production difficulties, and discussed strategic failures. This was no accident. The Special Projects Division deliberately provided prisoners with access to a broad spectrum of news sources, fully aware that exposure to a free press would gradually erode their perception of totalitarian control and propaganda. In the recreation halls of the camps, prisoners could listen to radio broadcasts featuring commentary that was often critical of military leadership. Comedians such as Bob Hope satirized top military officers and politicians, undermining their authority in the eyes of the prisoners. Prominent journalists like Edward R. Murrow and others questioned military strategies and exposed inconsistencies in official. During the height of World War II, the United States maintained a remarkable degree of openness regarding the treatment and conditions of its prisoners of war, a stance that was both unusual and bold, given the context of global conflict. Discussions and broadcasts of dissenting opinions were not hidden away, but were instead openly expressed across the nation, reaching a broad audience through various media outlets. This transparency extended even to enemy prisoners of war, who had access to a wide range of American political debates, criticisms, and internal disagreements. Such openness was, in itself, a demonstration of the strength and resilience of American democracy, contrasting sharply with the authoritarian regime's tendency towards secrecy and uniformity. Looking at the 1944 presidential election campaign, which unfolded amidst the backdrop of these wartime conditions, it is evident that the American political landscape was vibrant and contentious. The campaign period was marked by intense debates and lively opposition, with political figures openly challenging the administration's policies. Even within the camps where soldiers and internees observed this political contest, many perceived the electoral process and the democratic disputes as acts of political bravery. To the German military leaders watching from afar, this was nothing short of democratic suicide, a chaotic spectacle that seemed incompatible with the disciplined, unified image they believed authoritarian regimes thrived on. Amid these turbulent times, President Franklin D. Roosevelt faced a substantial challenge to his leadership from Thomas Dewey, a prominent political figure. This contest took place against the formidable backdrop of wartime stresses, yet it showcased the robustness of American political traditions. Meanwhile, the Republican Party vocally criticized various aspects of the war management, questioning strategies, troop movements, and resource allocation. The American press didn't shy away from voicing opposition either. Newspapers regularly published articles and opinion pieces that expressed dissenting views, further emphasizing the nation's commitment to free speech and democratic debate, even under the strains of global conflict. The nation's political cartoonists also played their part, providing satirical and often pointed depictions of the commanding officers and political leaders, openly mocking their decisions and behaviors. Despite such internal disagreements and public criticisms, the war effort persisted steadfastly and in many respects grew stronger. This scenario embodied a fundamental truth about American democracy. Its resilience lies in its capacity to withstand, even embrace, discord and disagreement. Rather than undermining the collective effort, these divisions highlighted a core strength, that a free society could sustain internal debate while united in purpose. Furthermore, from a humanitarian perspective, the conditions at American prisoner of war camps consistently received high praise from international observers. Reports compiled by the International Red Cross and stored in its Geneva archives offer a compelling and neutral assessment of American camp standards. These evaluations systematically indicated that American POW facilities not only met, but often surpassed the requirements outlined by the Geneva Convention. The reports serve as an authoritative verification of the humane treatment and comprehensive conditions the prisoners experienced. A particularly detailed report by Inspector Guy Metro in August of 1944 emphasized that American camps exceeded treaty expectations across numerous categories. The food provided was sufficient in quantity and quality, with daily caloric intake ranging from approximately 3,300 to 3,350,800 calories, a significant increase compared to the minimum 2,000 calories mandated by the Geneva Convention. Living arrangements ensured a generous amount of space, providing each prisoner with 40 square feet of personal living area, well above the mandated 27 square feet. Medical care was robust, with a ratio of 1 doctor for every 500 prisoners, compared to the treaty requirement of 1 for every 1,000. The health services were notably superior. Recreational activities, organized sports, libraries, and educational programs not only met, but often exceeded the standards set for adequate prisoner recreation, reflecting a philosophical commitment to humane treatment. Inspector Emil Sandstrom, who had previously inspected prisoner of war facilities across various Allied nations, including Canada, Britain, and Australia, expressed his strong approval of American conditions. Based on his comprehensive evaluations, he affirmed that American camps provided better conditions than their counterparts in other Allied countries. Perhaps most remarkably, the American approach to prisoner management was rooted in a philosophy that placed prisoners as temporarily displaced persons, individuals deserving humane treatment and respect, rather than enemies to be subdued or dehumanized. In the broader industrial context working within American factories, prisoners observed firsthand how production methods could revolutionize efficiency and profitability. At the Lonier Steel Plant, situated in Dangerfield, Texas, where many prisoners from Camp Hearn had been employed from 1944 through 1947-1945, The scale of output was staggering. Monthly production exceeded what the entire Ruhr Valley region had managed to produce in an entire year prior to the Allied bombing campaigns, a testament to the effectiveness of the American industrial system during wartime. What set this productivity apart was not solely the sophisticated machinery, but also the motivation infused into the workforce. Company records detailed how workers competed for bonuses based on their output, continually suggested improvements to increase efficiency, and took pride in their work. Factory charts displayed per-shift production results much like sports scores, fostering a sense of competition and achievement among the workers. Many of them, in the aftermath of the Second World War's tumultuous end in the spring of 1945, the clouds of devastation hung heavily over Germany, which was not only physically shattered, but also grappling with a profound ideological crisis. The Allied forces overseeing occupation recognized that merely repatriating prisoners of war and prisoners of status was insufficient. Instead, they embarked on extensive programs aimed at reconstructing a democratic, stable, and prosperous Germany from the ruins. This monumental effort went far beyond the straightforward process of sending individuals back home. It was a deliberate and carefully orchestrated transformation based on comprehensive occupation planning documents that detailed every facet of reintegration and nation building. One of the pivotal initiatives was the launch of what became known as Project Paperclip, initially designed to identify and extract scientific talent deemed valuable for post-war American interests. Yet, the scope of American interventions expanded significantly beyond that, encompassing broader programs aimed at preparing former prisoners of war and prisoners of status, or PSWs, to lay the foundation for a rebuilt democratic society. Central to this endeavor was the creation of educational courses in civil administration, meant explicitly to prepare these individuals for the challenging task of managing cities ravaged by war, ensuring that they would be capable of restoring order and structure amid chaos. The rehabilitation efforts placed considerable emphasis on agriculture, an essential element given the widespread starvation plaguing the German population. Training in farming techniques and food production aimed to restore the country's ability to feed its starving citizens, thus addressing an immediate humanitarian crisis, while also building the economic backbone for future stability. At the same time, medical personnel received instruction in public health practices that focused on epidemic prevention, a critical component in safeguarding the health of a population ravaged by disease and neglect. Engineers and infrastructure specialists studied reconstruction techniques, preparing to rebuild transportation networks, utility systems, and public facilities that had been obliterated by war. The Special Projects Division, an integral part of the occupation's strategic planning, identified future leadership among prisoners by providing supplementary training in governance, administration, and political process. This highlighted a forward-looking approach. Rather than punishing or stigmatizing the prisoners, the program sought to cultivate democratic ideals and equip notable individuals with the skills necessary to help restart their homeland's political life. The extent of these preparatory efforts can be gleaned from the reports of the Surgeon Marshal General, which documented an impressive scale of engagement by May of 1945, when approximately 31,000 prisoners of war had enrolled in vocational training and nearly 18,000 studied English as a second language. Meanwhile, around 12,000 participated in agricultural programs, 8,500 undertook technical courses, and roughly 6,200 studied business administration. Each facet carefully designed to rebuild a democratic Germany rooted in economic and social competence. In the lead-up to the official public announcement of the Marshall Plan's intent to aid European recovery, American authorities took the uncommon step of explaining their vision directly to the prisoners. Visits to the camps by officials of the State Department clarified that America's goal was to rebuild German society rather than exact retribution or impose punishment. By contrast, this was perceived as an incomprehensibly generous gesture from a victorious nation towards its defeated foe, and it shattered many lingering Nazi notions about racial struggle and the survival of the fittest, the core tenets that had once justified their brutal ideology. The impact of these efforts was profound, as evidenced by the remarkably low rates of disorderly conduct among the German prisoners in America. Out of approximately 425,000 German prisoners of war in the United States, only about 2,222 attempted escape, an alarmingly low escape attempt rate of just over 0.52%. Moreover, only 54 managed successful escapes lasting longer than a month, constituting merely 0.01%. Instances of sabotage were exceedingly rare, with just 7 confirmed cases, a negligible 0.001%. Similarly, documented refusals to work numbered only 178, representing around 0.04%. These statistics vividly illustrate not only the prisoners' generally compliant behavior, but also their willingness to participate in the rehabilitation programs. Post-war surveys conducted by the American occupation authorities revealed that an impressive 74% of the former prisoners who returned held favorable views of American democracy. Moreover, about 61% expressed support for the Marshall Plan as soon as it was announced, an indication of the profound impact the American positive approach and educational efforts had on shaping German perceptions. Over half, specifically 55%, advocated for a future alliance between Germany and the United States, recognizing the potential for a cooperative and peaceful relationship. Furthermore, more than a third of these individuals, 38%, harbored a desire to immigrate to America, seeking new opportunities and a fresh start. Correspondence between former prisoners and American families was also common, with approximately 23% maintaining ongoing contact, fostering a sense of enduring connection. Immigration records from the decades following the war indicate that around 5,000 former prisoners of war legally emigrated to the United States during the 1950s. Analyzing natural within the tapestry of human history, the ways in which different peoples learn to cooperate with one another can be recognized as remarkably diverse and complex. We have glimpsed into a future where such collaboration not only seems possible, but is demonstrably effective, reinforcing the idea that when individuals from disparate backgrounds come together, they can forge bonds that transcend their differences. This perspective was vividly expressed through the story of a particular place and time, an enclave known as Camp Hearn, which ceased operations in December of the year 1945, yet whose connections and influence persisted well beyond its closure. The legacy of this camp has been preserved and championed by the Hearn Heritage League, an organization dedicated to maintaining a thorough archive of correspondence from former prisoners of war who had once been held there, spanning an impressive period of 4 decades. These personal messages, including annual Christmas cards, arrived routinely, serving as tangible links to individuals whose lives had been forever altered by their internment. Remarkably, this exchange of letters continued until the last recorded prisoner of war passed away in the year 2001. Such enduring communication stands as powerful evidence of a process of deep and sustained personal transformation, one that was not fleeting or superficial, but instead marked by profound and lasting change. In the year of 1984, coinciding with the 40th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, a significant reunion took place, bringing together 50 former German prisoners of war who had experienced life at Camp Hearn. These men journeyed from various parts of the United States back to Texas, seeking to reconnect and reflect upon their shared past. Their reunion was widely covered by the local press, notably by the Hearn Democrat, which highlighted the event with considerable attention and detail. During this gathering, former adversaries who had once been enemies found themselves embracing those who had once been their captors. Veterans of the Wehrmacht paid homage by laying flowers at the American Legion Memorial, symbolizing respect, reconciliation, and the power of human empathy. One of the speakers at this reunion, Fritz Zimmermann, articulated a poignant reflection on the transformation that had taken place within these men. He expressed, "We arrived as enemies convinced of racial superiority and driven by a sense of national destiny. Yet we left as friends, understanding that democracy's inherent chaos is, in fact, its greatest strength, an intricate fabric woven from diversity that creates unity rather than weakens it." This statement encapsulates the core idea that the German prisoners' experiences in America led to a profound reevaluation of their beliefs and identities. The German experience of prisoners of war in the United States has been extensively studied by scholars and authors who have documented this extraordinary journey of change. Historically, the comprehensive research compiled in Arnold Kramer's influential work, Nazi Prisoners of War in America, published in 1979, provides detailed accounts of how these men's perspectives shifted through exposure to American society. Similarly, Judith Gansberg's Stalag USA, published in 1977, offers an analysis of the re-education programs implemented during their captivity. Antonio Thompson's Men in German Uniform, published in 2010, examines the labor programs that became devices for instruction and change. Ron Robbins' The Barbed Wire College, released in 1995, delves into the educational programs that facilitated ideological transformation. These scholarly works, grounded in meticulous research utilizing archives, interviews, and government records, confirm that the scope and impact of this transformation were truly remarkable. A consensus among historians is that the treatment of German prisoners of war by the United States stands as one of the most successful examples of re-education in history, one achieved not through indoctrination or force, but through exposing inmates to the realities of American life and ideals. The prisoners who arrived in America between the years 1943 and 1946 encountered countless sights and experiences that, from their perspective, seemed impossible given the worldview they carried with them. Every small act of freedom, every gesture of kindness, and every moment of unexpected generosity accumulated, gradually eroding their previous beliefs and expectations. Instead of the divided, fragile nation they had anticipated, they encountered a society brimming with confidence, a society capable of extending mercy even to its enemies. This transformation was not instigated solely by propaganda. It was rooted deeply in reality. These German prisoners of war observed democracy in motion through what appeared to be chaos but was, in truth, the vibrant process of a living, breathing society. They saw racial integration advancing, despite the societal segregation they had been told was immutable. They witnessed women exercising authority and leadership, all while maintaining their femininity. They experienced a profound change. They saw enemies become friends, not through grand propaganda, but through simple acts of common humanity. These sights of ordinary life, mundane to Americans, but revolutionary to those coming from environments of totalitarian rule, achieved what military defeat alone could not. They facilitated complete ideological transformation, turning former enemies into advocates and allies, simply by allowing them to witness and participate in what a free society genuinely looks. While their focus was initially on individual prisoners, their broader perspective extended to the shaping of entire nations. Their eyes, wide with astonishment, uncovered insights that would eventually foster the birth of pivotal alliances and policies. From their stunned observations emerged the foundational ideas behind the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and the concerted effort to rebuild and democratize post-war Europe. This remarkable transformation demonstrates that the most profound victories often do not stem from brute force or destruction, but rather from peaceful demonstrations and the power of example. True victory resides not in propaganda or forceful rhetoric, but in the tangible reality of change and renewal. It is rooted in humanity's capacity to forgive, to rebuild, and to unite across former divides. The unusual sights witnessed by German prisoners of war during their time in America became the raw material for an extraordinary historical transformation, one that turned erstwhile enemies into close allies. These experiences laid the groundwork for a process that proved the effectiveness of compassion, diplomacy, and realism in reshaping relationships that seemed once unbridgeable.